Good morning, my friends. We are back out in the shop today. Beautiful Nebraska weather. Crazy this time of year. Such a mild winter going on. We're probably going to pay for it later, though, if you know anything about Nebraska weather. But we're going to be in the 60s today. It's like 2 days away from Christmas, and we're in the 60s. So I have a Christmas gift that I need to get made, and I've kind of procrastinated getting it done. So we're going to get this thing started. It's going to take a little while to get done, but I don't need it till the 31st. So this is what we're going to do. Going to build another knife, and I always keep patterns from some of the favorite knives that I've made. It's kind of a finger hole knife that I've made before that I've been wanting to make again. So I have this old saw blade, and I start with something that's already got the big hole in the middle when I have it. Makes things much easier to get that perfect hole. And then we just trace the pattern onto this old saw blade that's beyond its time. And then I'm thinking we're going to use some more of this manzanita wood from out in California from my uncle's place up near Yosemite National Park. It's kind of a brush that grows out in the Sierra Nevadas, but it's really nice wood, and we'll use it for the handles. So we've got this traced out. We're going to get this cut out. I just used my little 4.5-inch grinder to cut most of it. And then some of the tighter profiles we'll just use the bench grinder for to get in there and smooth that out. And the method that we use, it's called the stock removal method. You start with steel that's already hard. So you don't have to do any of the forging, because I haven't built my forge yet. I sold the one I had before I moved. So I'm starting with steel that's already hard, and you just shape the steel into whatever you want to make it, and you don't have to worry about hardening and stuff like that. Now what you do have to worry about is getting the steel too hot to where it loses its hardness. And then you would obviously have to reharden it. But we're not going to do that. We're going to be real careful cutting this out that we don't get things too hard. We'll cool it off when it needs to be cooled off. But I'll get that thing cut out. So using our little 4.5-inch grinder, and I clamp it down to the table, we hack off some of these big sections first, because we can use these in the future for smaller knives. And then we just kind of hack off around the knife. Now that we have this, we can start coming in closer to our lines and start nibbling this stuff away, getting closer to our final profile. You can see now we're getting closer and closer. We're just kind of nibbling away at things little by little, doing what we can with the cutoff wheel. You can see in here in the middle, we're just whittling away at it, just a little bit at a time, and then we'll get the grinder out and kind of finish those inside radiuses. They won't be finished, but they'll have the material gone that we need gone. All right, you can see that we're cleaning this knife blade up. You don't have to have one of them big expensive belt sanders used for knife making. You can use one of those too. We have just a heavy magnet that we've clamped in here to the vise. So this is the area that you're looking to get clean up here. This back here where the handle goes, or the scales, it's not quite as important. These scratches here aren't going to hurt anything, but like these scratches here, we're going to keep going until those are gone. You can see we're not perfectly profiled yet, but we're just doing a rough ends, all we're doing. Now while we got the belt sander going, the blade's going to heat up a little bit, so check it every now and then to make sure it's not too hot. If you can't hold your hand on it, you need to stop and cool it off. Now when you switch sides, I put a little piece of masking tape down on the magnet because I don't want to scratch what we've already done on the other side. And then we'll polish up this side as well. Alright, we got both sides pretty well polished up. We are going to do some hand sanding on this later. But the biggest thing you want to do with that belt sander is a lot of these circular saw blades have circular scratches in them. You just want to make sure you get the bulk of those out and get everything kind of going in the same direction. So that's what we've done there. So now we put a new 120 grit belt on our little belt sander. And then anytime you do any changing or adjustments on your belt sander, you always want to come back and make sure that your table is square to your belt. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to refine the profile on this knife. So we got this little piece of leather that we keep for putting in the vise so we don't damage our blade. And then we got the Dremel out with a little sanding drum on it. And we're just going to clean up this little inside radius. All right, we got our little bit finer profile straightened out. I like the looks of it. Feels real good in the hand. That little ball on that handle fits real good in the hand. The thumb rest fits perfectly, and those are things you can adjust as you go. But that feels really good. That's what she's looking like. So now what we're going to do is we're going to lay out for our pins for the scales. So we'll lay that out and we'll get those holes drilled. Now this is hard steel. If you have a really good, nice new set of bits and you use plenty of lubrication, you could probably drill through this with your standard bits. But I have some hot shot bits that I got from a farm show out in California where you can drill right through hard steel. So if I have any issues, I'll use those bits. If not, I'll use my regular ones with some real good lubrication, some like Rapid Tap oil or something like that. So we'll come back when we have those holes drilled. So what I've decided to use for my pins is this is a big long machine screw. It's stainless and it's 3/16. So I'm going to cut two pieces out of this for my pins. And then I also have some of this hollow material that's 3/16 that I'm going to use for a lanyard hole in the back of the knife scale. If we look at the knife here, we'll put a lanyard hole back here and then maybe two stainless steel pins in there. All right, we got our holes drilled. It's actually two different size holes. This one's a little smaller. I had to go just a hair bigger than 3/16 for those stainless pins. But that's all right. We can keep track of that. So now is the time we're going to start doing some hand sanding on the blade. The last grit that we used on this with the belt sander was 120 grit. So I've got some 180 grit in my sanding block. So we're going to start with that, and then once I get done with 180 grit, if we see any scratches that are going a different direction or a little bit deeper, then that's going to take out. We're going to have to go back down a grit to like 120 to get those scratches out. All right, we've spent about 30 minutes on that 180 grit doing both sides. I'm not seeing anything crazy that the finer grits aren't going to take out. Just the hand sanding, sometimes you get just a little bit off on your direction. But as you get finer and finer, that's not going to matter as much. But you'll notice when you're sanding, as you start losing grit, that gets finer and finer. I replaced that in between sides. I started with a fresh piece on both sides. So I spent about 15 minutes on each side. So now we're going to go to a 220 grit and see what that looks like. If we see something that's not coming out with a 220, we'll have to go back to the 180. All right, folks, we've taken it to 600 grit. We did, let's see, 180, 220, 320, 400, and then 600. We just finished the 600. We spent about 15 to 20 minutes on each grit on each side. And you will see it's not perfect. There is some dirt and some smears on there that you're seeing, but 600 is about as far as I like to take a knife blade. And the reason for that is I still want the knife to look handmade. If you take it down to like a perfectly chrome finish, it looks like any other carbon copy stamped out factory blade. And some people will hear me say this and say, oh, that's a cop-out. He just doesn't want to put in the work. Not true. I have the machinery here, and I got 1200 grit sandpaper I can go to if I want to. If you'll see in my other videos, I still like them to look handmade, and I like people not to be afraid to use them. If you get some pristine, polished, shiny, pimped out blade, they're not going to want to use it. So that's why we do that. So we're going to start, probably get the scales rough cut, and we'll start working on the handle of this thing. Actually, I was wrong. We're not doing handle yet. We need to work on the edge. So I got our little jig here, our hollow grinding jig that we can run the blade up on. So we're going to get working putting the edge on that thing. All right, we got a razor sharp edge on this knife. So now we are going to put some masking tape over the blade and start working on the handle. All right, we drilled our scales. We drilled through the knife blank and line all the holes up so everything lines up. Then we pinned our scales together, and then we almost finished sanded the front like we normally do. If you remember from the last video, we're going to get some finer sandpaper on the front of this and basically finish the front of the scales, because we won't be able to sand those once we glue this thing together. So once we get the front of this all sanded up pretty, we're going to start gluing up. Alright, we're ready to glue this thing up. We've cleaned the knife blade with some alcohol. So we're going to mix our epoxy. So put a little bit of our resin in here. You want to do equal parts. So you just kind of eyeball it. So about right there. And we'll mix that up. This little piece of metal here. Alright, got her mixed up. Hopefully we got enough here. It's going to be close. Get our Q-tip. Put a little bit on here. So we're going to get our scale, put some right out on the end here. Alright, so let's start lining this baby up. Get a little epoxy on our pins. So now, get this thing going in there. Alright, beautiful. Might as well cut this off. Put that about halfway in there. Okay, now we're on. Problem is we got epoxy all over this. So what we're going to do, we're going to get us a piece of tape. We all know masking tape is designed to come off. So we're going to put a little masking tape on here. And then we're going to turn it over, do the same thing on that side. Trying not to get epoxy all over my fingers. Okay folks, we got that glued up. Got the epoxy on it. Now we just got to let it cure. We're actually going to take it in the house because it's a little warmer in there. It'll cure quicker. So we'll see you back when we're ready to pull the clamps off. All right, we brought that in the house to cure. It's supposed to take about, sets in 5 minutes, says cures in 1 hour. So about an hour from now, I'll pull the clamps off and we'll show you what that looks like. In the meantime, I'm going to get these dirty clothes off and go take a shower. Be right back. All right, it's been a little over an hour. Pull the tape and the clamps off. Kind of get an idea what it's going to look like. I pulled the tape off of the blade. We'll have to do some more hand sanding on that just to polish it up a little bit. And clean up the epoxy and sand the scales down. But looking pretty good. So we'll come back to this in the morning. It'll be a continuation of this same video. So you'll see this in the morning. We'll start sanding it up. Next, we're going to get back on this knife. We got to get it sanded up. We're going to sand these corners off. Maybe thin out the scales a little bit. And then we'll have to do some hand sanding, a little more hand sanding on the blade to polish it back up. But we'll bring you along. Almost done. Alright, first thing we did was sand the pins down flush. That way we could lay the knife down flat on the table. And then we could sand the edges down to meet the tang of the knife. So we've done that all the way around. We'll touch up any spots that got a weird looking transition in them. And then you go through and figure out how much space you want between the tang and your radius. And you try to get that same space all the way around. You can see there's about 1/8 to 1/4 inch on both sides of the tang all the way around. You basically hold it on a 45-degree angle and just go all the way around. So now we've got that all the way around. So now we'll come back on this edge and we'll soften this edge and blend it from this to this. And then we'll soften this edge just a little bit, and we'll do that on both sides. You can see the epoxy in here inside the lanyard hole. We'll just punch it out from the other side, or just figure out whatever drill bit fits inside of that and just drill that right back through. That's not a big deal. The pins turned out pretty nice, those stainless pins. They're going to be nice and shiny. And we'll use a silver button on the leather when we do the leather. That way it'll match. So we'll soften these edges and then we'll get to the hand sanding. Alright, we got it all sanded up. We took it to 320 grit, which is all I do on the wood. We've got her all polished up. So now we've taped off the blade around the scales, and we're going to shoot this thing with some lacquer and let it dry. It's going to turn a beautiful red color. Okay, folks, got the lacquer on it. That's what she looks like now. Came out beautiful. Love that color. Some beautiful grain in it. So we're basically done with this knife. We got some polishing up to do of the blade. Just got some smudges on it from all the taping and all that. But that's a good looking knife. The next thing we're going to do is make the leather for it, but we've already got a video on that, so I'm not going to bore you with the leather making. So I hope you've enjoyed the process of making this knife. It's taken us a good probably a good 2 days, probably 16 hours to get this thing done. Get a little better at it to where I can do them a lot quicker. But a lot of hand work. but it's a satisfying project. So till next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. If you had any questions about how we make these things, feel free to comment, and I'll get back to you. Bye bye.